Hello and welcome to Films and That, the show where we talk about films that usually don't get talked about. My name's Rob Turnbull.
And my name's Sam Hall.
And today we are talking about Terry Gilliam's Tideland. Tideland follows the imagination of a young girl called Jeliza-Rose who is orphaned and left alone to play on a deserted prairie. This review contains spoilers. The film starts off when we are treated to a family life of Jeliza-Rose, the main character, and her father and mother, who are essentially junkies. They're alcoholics and junkies, aren't they?
Yes, played by Jeff Bridges and Jennifer Tilly. She's just a very bit character, isn't she? Just sort of promising things to a child and then being horrible to her in like an instant.
A split second,
yeah.
How many times do I have to tell you to stay away from my chocolate, you little bitch?
Yeah, you little bitch.
Jeliza-Rose is kind of called on to help her father with his heroin addiction. She boils up the heroin on the spoon and she sorts out the injection.
Yeah, a social worker's nightmare, I guess. Or, well, I don't know, I suppose that's how they get the work, isn't it? But like, she's not necessarily neglected, but at the same time, she's born into a world, you know, that most of us would feel completely uncomfortable with, because she's happy to inject her own father with heroin. She doesn't question it because that's what she's been brought up to believe. She's
just been forced into an adult kind of nightmare, I suppose.
Yeah,
world.
very, very early on. So I guess most of the film is kind of about how a child copes with being pushed too quickly into adulthood.
It was the methadone that killed her. Should have kept her on the junk.
But then he freaks out, and because of all the drugs that they've got in the house, he thinks that the police are going to go after him. So then he runs away with his daughter. So they arrive at Jeff Bridges' mother's house, and she's not there. Do we ever find out what happened to her?
Well, later on, we find out that she fell down the stairs and presumably, you know, snapped her neck or something. So the house has been abandoned for years. For whatever reason, Jeff Bridges has not utilised it, has not sold it on. Maybe because he just doesn't have the intellect to do that. And it's become his getaway place.
So straight away, basically, Jeff Bridges takes heroin and, well, he dies. Jeliza-Rose is just left to her own devices, pretty much abandoned, no one there to help her.
So the rest of the film, it becomes a story about a small girl playing and using her imagination. She's not acknowledged the horrors that have happened to her. She doesn't even acknowledge that her father's dead throughout the entire film.
And when her mother dies, she just says the line, "Oh, well, I guess Mum's dead," or something.
Now we can eat all our choc bars.
Now we can have a chocolate.
She tends to internalise a lot of her emotions, and her psyche is then played out by these little dolls' heads that she carries around. And so if she's frightened, one of the doll's heads will talk about being frightened, and that's the only way she ever expresses her emotion.
Bring Satin Lips with us. She can help. I don't want to go. Shut up, you baby.
Part of it is her aspirations as well. One of the doll's heads has this sort of upper class English accent for some reason. And I think it's implied that, you know, that there's an aspect of her that wants to be wants to reach a social class, I guess, that's much higher than that.
What did I tell you? Safe as houses.
There's a house that lives essentially their next door neighbours that is owned by a sister and brother.
Yes, the older woman called Dell.
Who Jeliza thinks she's a ghost to begin with.
Yeah. Yes. she upset her because she says, "Well, you're dead." She goes, What a terrible thing to say. Because she just doesn't question the idea that, you know, that she's just assumed
she's obviously a ghost.
She must be a ghost. She's got dread and this sort of milky eye, Texas Chainsaw Massacre sort of inbred family feel about her, I guess.
Dead people.
Dreadful, isn't it?
But again, the character of Jeliza-Rose deals with this situation in the way a child would, you know, with some aspect of fear, but then quickly accepting, you know, the kind of something that perhaps most people would be a bit more horrified by.
Similarly, the brother of Dell, who is autistic and called Dickens, she does accept him as kind of who he is quite quickly. Initially, she's scared by him because he's wearing like a diving suit, isn't he? He's wearing,
Yes.
He's got one flipper on and a mask, and she's kind of freaked out by him because he's staring through the window. But then once she realises he's just a person, she's quite accepting of him and
Yeah,
makes a friend.
and this is also where the world that she's playing in is expanded a bit.
Because of his lower IQ, he's more of her age mentally.
Yes, he's more child than man, and he himself is playing as an adult, you know, in the way a child would.
He treats the prairie as a kind of sea, calls himself the captain a lot. So he has his own submarine, he calls it Lisa.
Which is a shed, I assume?
Yeah, it's just a kind of sheet he's put up or something, and he keeps all his possessions in there. And there's a train that goes past both these houses, and he takes it upon himself to kind of try and kill the train, essentially. He calls it a shark, the great shark.
The great metal shark.
The monster shark. As I hunt them all over the South Pacific in my submarine.
Unfortunately, he has access to armaments.
There's quite a sense of foreboding, I feel. Like when he gets the shotgun shells out, you know what he's going to do with them, because he's put pennies on the track previously to he calls it bait for the shark.
Yeah.
So you know he's going to put them on the tracks, you know they're going to go off if someone can be hurt, and there's all this theme of innocence not being kept in check, I think.
Yes, and the other way round as well. Because it's done from the perspective of a child, I think, the way the music runs is that the tension is derived from, say, when she loses one of her doll's heads. So it's something that is utterly meaningless in real life, but to her is utterly terrible. You know, as far as she's concerned, she lost one of her friends. And the real horrific things, the things that are the real consequences, these aren't seen as the real problems in the characters' lives, I think.
And this culminates in the final scene of the film when Dickens gets his hand on some dynamite and actually does derail the train.
It's obviously a scene of tragedy, but the way it's played out is almost that it's quite a positive thing for her. It's a triumph for Dickens, although we don't know if he survives.
I think I'm pretty sure he died because Dell can't find him.
My captain.
It's okay. It's okay.
Jeliza-Rose at that point gets picked up by some woman, some survivor on the train. You can kind of assume that maybe she then decides to raise her. But that's you know, the sequel that never happened. So that's not terribly important. It would have been such
a boring sequel.
Yes, it would have done, yeah.
this girl grows up and has a normal life. But that's an interesting point, that she gets taken away from this life, because it's kind of toxic, that environment that they're in there, where there's just nothing to do, just essentially to go mad. I think Gilliam, in this sense, is using madness as a way for people to cope with what's going on around them. The kind of nightmarish existence causes them to be mad in a way.
Yeah, as frightening as that seems.
I love you so much.
So perhaps we should go on to some of the more controversial stuff, I guess, from there.
Yeah.
You're a little cutie.
He's 20, is he supposed to be?
He's in his mid-20s. I think the actor's in his mid-20s as well. Jeliza-Rose essentially falls in love with him, or she thinks she does at least.
Yeah, in a preteen kind of way. You know, like people say, "Oh, he's my boyfriend." You know, when they girls would say at that age, and it's just them trying to be grown up, I guess. You know, in their minds.
And he's not grown up enough to kind of see the taboo of it and what's wrong with it. He doesn't get the social taboo of it, so he just goes along with it.
It can make it uncomfortable viewing, you know, if you're honest. But it's that aspect of it. It's still played down quite a lot. It's just the fact that it's there. I think it makes your imagination run wild, and suddenly.
Well, there's lots of innocence about it because they're both essentially the same mental age.
Yeah.
They don't see it as a sexual relationship by any means. It's more uncomfortable to see the actors doing it because you know they know what's going on, whereas the characters don't understand.
Silly kissers.
Silly kissers.
They don't do anything more than kiss, and then even then, it's just a peck, you know, rather than anything more than that.
That's okay then. It's fine.
It's, you know, I'm not excusing it. It's your imagination that sort of leads you on to think that it's something more controversial than it is.
But it's only controversial within our society, I would have thought. It's like what Gilliam was saying about it's us imposing our views on what these people should do.
Well, yeah, it's perhaps maybe jumping to conclusions of sort of saying, these two people with mental ages of children clearly don't seem to view it as anything other than that. But, the way in our society that we connect these things is that we then jump from that to something quite horrific like rape, and paedophilia.
It wasn't well reviewed, was it? It wasn't received very well.
No. I think part of that probably was due to our sensibilities. I think some of these critics were overreacting a bit, but at the same time, I do think that the final execution of what the premise could have been, I think it doesn't quite work for me anyway. I still like it for the strengths that it has, but I feel that Terry could have done a much better job, and I know has done a better job in other films.
So what was your problem with the execution specifically?
Some of the cinematography, even if it wasn't amateurish, to me it felt a bit amateurish. I don't think it was necessarily pulled together so well. I don't think all the visuals looked as good as they could have done. There's
lots of great visuals in it though. There's really nice shots of the prairie, and there's a nice crane shot of the upturned truck at the beginning.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's full of bad visuals. I'm just saying I think that it's just there's parts of it that it's not flawless for me by any means. I think that it's a bit messy when it comes together. I think a lot of people talked about it as being a bit descriptions. I've said people have said like it's pointless.
Well, there isn't a plot.
Which is quite it's unfair because there's not supposed to be. I think that there's sort of a plot, but it's not. It's by no means a traditional narrative film.
But it's a character-driven film. It's about the characters are deciding to do this now. It's not. They don't have a want and a need, a goal that they need to accomplish.
To say that it's not got a point or it's not got a plot, it doesn't. It's not necessarily an apt criticism, in my view. A child playing doesn't have a point to what they're doing. They're just playing. It's just continuous because they're just having fun by themselves.
And they're just dealing with the situations that come to them as they come.
Yeah.
Which is what happens in this.
Yeah, there's not meant to be a denouement. The point that it stops is when they go to bed. When they're tired and they have dinner or whatever. Yeah. That's when it stops.
I think you're being a bit unfair saying the execution was sloppy, though.
That's just my opinion.
But I think it's perfectly fine. There's lots of really great things to look at in it.
I think it's better than the Brothers Grimm.
I haven't seen that though.
Oh, it was a bit studio-y for Gilliam. Yeah.
Tideland was made very quickly. It does feel a bit low budget in places. Is that kind of what you mean?
Okay, yeah, that's probably part of it. Also, I don't think Jeff Bridges is that good in it.
He's not in it that much.
He's not in it that much, no. So that's all right, I guess. But there's a lot of melodrama.
That's how Gilliam directs actors. He seems fascinated by the child, like actors and things like that.
Yeah.
Forcing that on people rather than kind of being all repressed and obeying social etiquettes and things like that. He's more about breaking those down, I feel.
Yes. Yeah. I think it's okay.
It definitely is divisive. I think you just have to see it though. I think it's a very interesting film. I never get bored of it whenever I watch it. It's never like, oh, this is 2 hours, I'm just sitting here watching these same things again. They always find something interesting.
It's a fair point. I could rewatch it again.
It's definitely interesting. We can't say whether it's good or bad, but it's interesting.
Yeah, and that's all we need to ask of the films that we do, is that they're interesting.
And that they exist. Alright, I think we should end.
Oh wait, what do we do? We do another bit, don't we? We say thanks for that.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Okay.
Okay, that's it for this time on Films and That. Thanks for watching, thanks for subscribing. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Let's try to be a mummy by not moving.
You've got to have your tongue out.